Welcome to Straight Outta Health IT. Getting into health tech is rough, but here's an unfiltered dialogue of healthcare leaders and influencers covering a wide variety of issues affecting healthcare and the health tech industry. And now your host, Christopher Cunny.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Straight Outta Health IT, where we tackle the critical issues at the intersection of technology, healthcare, and community well-being. Today, we're going to dive into a deeply human and often overlooked topic, this epidemic of touch starvation or skin hunger, particularly, how it impacts communities of color. So exactly what is that? As I did my research in preparation for the guest, it was really the guest that's going to be on the show today. It's really interesting. And I started actually thinking about my own experiences, which I'll talk about later on in our program. But this concept of touch starvation or skin hunger, which basically refers to physical and emotional longing for touch, which isn't being fulfilled. Human touch really is a fundamental aspect of our well-being. It actually helps regulate our emotions and reduce stress and fosters connections. And when people are deprived of this very basic need, it can lead to all sorts of feelings of isolation and anxiety and depression and a whole host of other mental and physical health issues. And unfortunately, this issue is particularly prevalent in the communities of color, really due to a lot of combinations of cultural and socioeconomic factors, which we'll touch base in our conversation today. And unfortunately, the lasting impact of things like racism, which often isolates communities from care and to support their needs. Who better to talk about this topic in greater detail than my friend and colleague, Mr. Ben Wilson. Ben,
hey, Christopher.
Hi, Ben. Ben is the CEO of the Color of Sound Foundation, and he's also leading an initiative called the Chronically Undertouched Project. I'm so happy to have him on the program to share his story and talk about what he's doing with these two initiatives. Ben, again, welcome to Straight Outta Health IT.
Great to be here, Christopher. Really excited to talk to you about Color of Sound and the Chronically Undertouched Project and get caught up with you. We've known each other a long time.
Yes, we have.
And looking forward to catching up.
Sounds great. Yeah, we go way back in our early healthcare IT days as well, too. So it's interesting to see both of our journeys and where we are today. One of the things I like to do at the very beginning of the episode is to really talk more, learn more about you, for our audience get the chance to learn more about you. And so before we delve into the topic itself, could you take a few minutes to just talk about your own personal and professional journey and what led you to this place where you felt compelled to want to now educate and advocate for individuals who are being deprived of this really basic human need?
I'm happy to do that. I won't take too much time because I've had a long career and we could take up the whole 30 minutes with that. But so I grew up in Northern California, went to Stanford for college. I was a political science major, was always interested in the intersection between business and public service. And healthcare seemed like the right place to land
right
for me. My first job out of college was actually working for a medical paging company. It was like an early digital health company, and we had a medical paging network. And I went into doctors' offices trying to get the doctors to swap out their pagers for a medical paging network. I went to graduate school at Berkeley, got an MBA and a master's in public health. It's a program where you get 2 degrees in 3 years and around health services management. And it's where I really gained an interest in entrepreneurship.
Sure.
The Lester Center at Berkeley is well known and for their leadership and entrepreneurship. And I was there in the mid-90s when the .com era was getting started.
Exactly.
And so there was a lot of excitement then. And so after I graduated, I jumped into a company called babycenter.com. I was one of the very earliest employees there. And that company ended up creating the number one website for new and expectant parents. It still has that status and is owned by Johnson & Johnson right now.
That's very interesting because a lot of companies didn't survive the .com bubble. So the fact they're still in existence today says a lot.
Yeah, I'm really proud of that. And then I ran a spin-off of Baby Center called Consumer Health Interactive, which we developed wellness websites for health plans And we sold that company to what is now Caremark CVS. And after that, I ended up at Intel doing an entrepreneurial project. They were hiring entrepreneurs at Intel to start a health and life sciences group. I ended up staying there for 10 years, getting to travel around the world to China and Australia, Europe, South America, evangelizing healthcare technology around the world. So that was a great experience for me and a really exciting time because I was at Intel when the Affordable Care Act was enacted and was part of the group that helped to influence the federal government in terms of the policies, because Intel had a good relationship with the Obama administration. And that was a really exciting time. And then after I left Intel, I joined a couple of other startups, including Together Senior Health, which was a online service for people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And I left that company in July of last year. And I decided to rewire, not retire.
I like that.
To start my own nonprofit and sit on a couple of other nonprofit boards. And so I started a nonprofit called Color Sound. And Color Sound is dedicated to improving the lives of people of color in the PNW, the Pacific Northwest, and beyond. And so we have 4 focus areas: racial healing, restorative justice, housing and land access, and economic development.
Love it.
That's where I'm at right now, and building that organization. And our first project is the Chronically Undertouched Project short film, which we can talk about.
Yes. So let's go ahead and jump right into it, man. First of all, an amazing career. I personally didn't realize you had done all that, and I've known you for years as well. But I want to jump into this whole concept of the Chronically Untouched and the Chronically Untouched Project in particular. First of all, what led you to wanting to focus on this specific area and then expound upon this project that you've embarked on as well?
Yeah. When I moved to Port Townsend, I decided I wanted to get more involved in anti-racist work and having an impact on communities of color. And so as part of that, I helped to bring Aaron Johnson from Holistic Resistance to Port Townsend to run some anti-racist workshops for several groups here locally.
Sure.
And he ended up actually staying at my house, and we built a personal relationship. And then I started to learn about his Chronically Undertouched Project. And the Chronically Undertouched Project comes out of this anti-racist work, but is focused specifically on helping Black men who have traditionally not received the same level of tender platonic touch, especially from our brothers and our fathers and sons and other men. And to your point earlier, that has a huge impact on our nervous system, on our mental health, on our wellness, how we feel about ourselves and how we feel about each other and how we treat our partners as well and our children. And
exactly.
And so it has a profound impact, and it is a very simple concept, really. And so I personally connected with the concept. Mm-hmm. And so that's part of why I jumped into the project and wanted to fund it and support the work that Aaron's doing.
Sure.
I have a mixture. We all have when I go ahead and talk about this, everyone has a touch story, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, undertouched, overtouched, but a mixture of both. I am a mixture of both. I was undertouched by my father, who was mostly absent, not just emotionally, but physically, and overtouched by my mother. And I was her partner. She didn't have a partner when I was growing up, and I was an only child. It was just
surrogate.
Yeah. And so the combination of those things makes my touch story pretty complicated and something I wanted to address personally, and then why I saw so much value in working on this project.
No, I appreciate you being very transparent about that, because as we started preparing for this episode, I actually started thinking about my own life and my own journey as well, too, and realized came to the realization that I experienced the same challenges as well, too, growing up being undertouched. Specifically, my dad was an only child. He did not know his father. He grew up as an only child. He was in the household, and he was actually a great father, a great role model in a lot of respects. as well too, but we did not have any close relationship in terms of loving relationship where he would hug on us or tell us he loved us or vice versa. We weren't a hugging family. And I, even with my mom, to so that I think about it as well, not that she wasn't affectionate, but she wasn't overly affectionate, and we didn't do a lot of hugging, and we didn't say, I loved you a lot. We knew we loved each other, and he was a great provider and a great role model in the community and wasn't abusive or anything of that nature, but you could tell he was lacking having had that experience himself growing up. And so he didn't even know that was the norm to hug on your children and love them and say, I love you, and for us to stay that back. So fast forward me now becoming a father and adult, I found myself struggling with it as well too. Quite honestly, I said to myself I was going to be different than my father and say, I'm going to tell my kids I love them a lot, hug on them. But I find it's foreign for me in some cases to do that. It's uncomfortable sometimes, quite honestly, to do that, to love on them in that way. Not that I don't love them, not that I don't say I love you, but it's not something that comes natural. I have to force myself to do it. I appreciate you bringing this topic up because it's started to be very therapeutic for me as well, too. And the question is why? What are those societal barriers that contribute to this prevalence of touch starvation in our communities, especially communities of color? And maybe you can expound on that based on some of the research that you've done.
Yeah. So the undertouched phenomenon, especially for Black men and Black people, comes directly out of slavery. The Black narrative where the Black man is scary and big and can only do violent things, right, in the military, be in football. Sure. That's the only place where Black men can deliver value. That whole narrative led to this Black brood narrative where white people in general were educated to be afraid of Black men, and especially white women were told to stay away from Black men. And it created this scary image of the Black. And because of that, not only with people of other races, but even within the Black community, people are afraid of each other, and it leads to that lack of tenderness and touch and closeness that we all want. And human connection is the most simplest thing that we need and that we all thrive on. And so this lack of touch leads directly to that. And it all comes out of this Black brute narrative where we still see symbols of this in the media. I saw a magazine cover recently that from the last decade where it showed LeBron on one side and Giselle, the model, on the other.
Right.
And it looked just like King Kong and in the movie and the next. We're still pushing forward that narrative.
Yeah.
Today.
Yeah, these micro racist concepts and stereotypes have a direct impact on us all. I get into some of these conversations with my white colleagues, and we have to get on the topic of racism. And I talk about how racism is really not my problem. It's really yours because I love being Black. And you have to ask yourself why you have a problem with me being Black. I can't answer that for you. I say I have to navigate it and those concepts because they have a direct impact on me personally as well too. And in fact, what that narrative has done has created a prison, a mental prison for us all, a mental prison for that individual, that a white individual who feels afraid of a person simply because their skin color is different than them, and a prison for myself because I can't be as expressive or as affectionate potentially as I would want to be in fear that you might take that the wrong way as well too. And so it's really created this barrier, this unnecessary barrier amongst us all. And to your point, now we carried it on as trauma of people of color, as trauma that infect our families now. And so we're afraid to even show affection to our own people who look like us.
You and I both come out of a corporate background,
right,
and which was a primarily white environment, and especially healthcare technology. And yeah, we experienced the result of those stereotypes that lead to this Black brute narrative. And at least I personally did.
No, absolutely.
Always had to be careful of not being the angry Black man in the room. Right. I had to comfort my colleagues all the time to make sure that that they felt comfortable. And it's hard enough just to be an executive and to get the work done without having to take care of everyone else as well.
That's right. And to your point as well, too, and for me, you talked about the LeBron narrative where I'm 6'4" as well, too. So when I walk in the room, I'm one of the biggest people that walk, and I look like a linebacker. And so I walk in the room, I immediately look to some intimidating. So I'm constantly thinking about how to reduce that tension or create a narrative where you don't have to be afraid of me. If that narrative is in your head, and in some cases, it may not even be in that person's head, but I'm so conditioned that I always have to operate in that way. When I walk into that room, I have to make sure that I create a persona that is inviting for anyone who is interacting with me as well. And that can be very stressful because now you're constantly wearing that mask, that idea, that concept to how am I being perceived by this other group of people, on top of the other things you have to deal with and just managing your job on a day-to-day basis and dealing with the politics and just getting the deadlines done and all the other narratives that take place. I'm sure there are others out there who probably experience the same thing. And in fact, I know they are because I coach and mentor several people of color, especially men, who talk about this narrative with me as well. So I'm glad we're really having this conversation. So how does this project, this Chronically Untouched Project, how is it starting to address these specific barriers, and what strategies and tools are you using to try to reach and support individuals who are experiencing touch starvation?
So our first project is this Chronically Undertouched film, which we're calling Dark and Tender. The film is going to be a platform to help educate and connect with all kinds of folks, but specifically Black men, in order to introduce them to the concept and to engage them in our overall movement. So this is a film to support a movement. It's not a film to go eat some popcorn. And it is a film to get you engaged, to help heal you, and to bring you into the fold. And the film, we are in the final editing of that right now. It will be debuting at the Port Townsend Film Festival on September 20th of this year in 2024. We are then going to be doing a series of house parties and then local events as well. We have an event in Seattle at the Beacon Cinema in Columbia City where it's going to be open to the public as well. And then we're going to do, in addition to the Pacific Northwest local screenings, we're going to do a college tour in the spring of 2025. And so that'll get us closer to Atlanta and Southeast, because we particularly going to be focused on HBCUs. And yeah, so the CUT project itself, the Chronically Undertouched Project, it's underway, and they are building out educational materials. They are training touch activists. So they're building out a network of folks that can help individuals to work through their issues related to touch. And then we're going to be writing a book. And then after this short film, we're going to be publishing a feature film and potentially a docu-series as well. We're just getting started. And right now, it's really the goal is to build a lot of visibility and momentum for the movement, start to get people engaged, and then and start to have conferences where people can come together and share ideas, and then move beyond. In the long run, we want to move beyond Black men, because everybody, like we were saying, everybody has a touch story and everyone relates to this concept. And one of the reasons why it's gained momentum is that folks of all backgrounds, when they hear it, want to support it.
Absolutely. Now, that's amazing. I applaud you and your team for the commitment you're making to this endeavor as well. And I know this is a tool, resource for starting initially with men of color as a mechanism to heal them as they go through their own evaluation of how they deal with lack of touch. But I'm also wondering if this is a good education tool for the white community as well, too, and understanding the impact of bias and racism and these concepts and how they're affecting other individuals emotionally, mentally, and society as a whole.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Our primary goal is working with Black men and Black folks more generally, but a great side benefit is that when people of all backgrounds see this film, they will relate to it. They will gain some compassion. They'll understand some of the structural components of our society and our history that have led to the chronically undertouched issue, and also better understand the experience of Black people in this country and the barriers that they run against. But I think this will be beneficial to folks of all backgrounds and in some ways bring people together rather than
separate
just
them
on one particular group.
Absolutely. And to your point, I think everyone has a touch story. And so maybe this becomes a conduit that allows us to connect at a very basic human level, humanistic level as well. Definitely excited to see the results of the project. And I'll do a shameless plug as well, too. I know our local NAHSE chapter, our National Association of Healthcare Service Executives, the Atlanta chapter is going to do a screening, the film as well, too, in mid-September as well. So those of you who are interested in actually seeing the screening, check us out or reach out to me and I can give you more details on when that's going to take place. Of course, this podcast is called Straight Outta Health IT. And so I can't not talk about technology to some degree in the conversation. And I'm just wondering, how is the Chronically Untouched Project leveraging technology to help address the issues at hand?
We're going to be using all kinds of virtual platforms to distribute. And so we're actually in the process of developing a virtual strategy. We realize that there'll be some folks that see it in the comfort of their own homes.
Right.
Some people will want to organize an event where the film is part of that event. And so that's similar to what we're doing with your organization. We'll do some custom events as well that are both virtual and on the ground at the same time. So we're working through all that, but we're going to be leveraging all kinds of digital platforms to educate people about this beyond film as well. So we have a strong social media presence. We're going to be on Instagram and Facebook with materials and videos and short reels that people can watch and get educated and engage with the content. And then eventually maybe there will be a Chronically Undertouched app of some kind.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing. Yes.
Where you can put in some of your background and things issues that are important to you, and it will take you through some daily exercises and ways to improve your wellness. But that's in the future right now.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was thinking to your point that all the things you just mentioned and how this could be incorporated into telemedicine and virtual care as a tool or resource for telebehavioral health, things of that nature as well, too. And then I'm just wondering also if there are opportunities to collect data, population data from people who are experiencing this. And I don't know if there may be some research organization or the government institution, whether it's CDC, NIH, or whatever, that might have some interest in some data that comes out of the experiences that you're capturing as well, too. So I could see quite a bit of need for the use of technology and data analytics tools, maybe even AI, a way of supporting this endeavor.
Yeah, no, I think you picked up on a really good point. The intersection between data and technology and research is going to be really important to this project because one of the things that we talk about a lot is that tender platonic touch towards Black men. If you Google it, nothing comes up.
Oh wow!
We call it ungoogleable.
Oh, okay. Wow!
And so we are experiencing an ungoogleable act when we provide tenderness to a brother, and so we need to make it Googleable. And in order to do that, we need to start to publish papers.
Exactly.
We need to collect data. We need to source grants to support the research. But we are starting to collect data on it because we know how important. So we're doing some more informal data collection right now that we'll be publishing. But we're also, as part of this film debut and the visibility the project will get, starting to engage with different universities and government agencies to explore research projects.
Wonderful. No, that's exciting. How do you measure the success of this initiative? As you look 5-10 years from now and you see the journey that the color of sound is taken and this particular project for around a chronically untouched. What's your measure for success with this endeavor?
It's all about impact, right? And so all the outcomes measures that will give us a sense of what level of impact we've had will be useful. At the very basic level, it's how many people see the film, or how many people come to one of our conferences, how many people attend a workshop, how many people read a book that we've created. That will be some sort of basic data that will tell us that we've at least reached people and they've had the opportunity to engage with the content. But we want to go beyond that and start to look at, on a public health level, on a population level, what kind of impact can these programs have? So if we were to go into an HBCU and provide workshops to a series of dorms within the HBCU and track how, through surveys and other medical measurements, how their mental health, how their blood pressure, how their perspective has changed, how their relationships have changed as a result of going through these workshops or being exposed to the content.
Exactly.
Because that'll be critical, because we do think this is at the heart of a mental health crisis for Black folks. And in order to really have an impact in terms of being part of medical treatment, being part of psychological delivery systems, that's where we're going to have the long-term impact. And that's where we'd like to get eventually.
No, absolutely. And in fact, I was thinking this could almost become literally another social determinant of health. We look at all these other socioeconomic factors. This concept around touch or experience, showing affection has a direct impact on your mental well-being. And so I could see down the road our Health and Human Services or the CMS or whoever is managing these overall concepts around these determinants of health would include this whole concept around your experience in being touched, the infection within your own family, your own community, being a component of that social determinant equation as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say that a key social determinant of health is isolation and loneliness.
Yes.
And so this directly relates to that. The difference between getting a phone call and someone coming over to your house and putting their arm around you and watching television with you, it is qualitatively different. And
absolutely.
In terms of its impact. Yes, absolutely. We think we're part of that. That the Undertouched Project is addressing social determinant of health issue that's very prevalent.
Exactly. I tell you, Ben, this has been a very eye-opening discussion. This Chronically Untouched Project is addressing a critical and often ignored aspect of healthcare that has deep implications for individuals and communities across the board. So for our listeners who want to learn more about the project itself, your foundation, where can they find information to guide them?
Yeah, so if they want to connect with me and the Color of Sound, they can go to colorsound.org and connect with me there. If they want to learn more about the Chronically Undertouched Project, they can go to colorsound.org, but also they can go directly to cutproject.org and learn more about that there as well.
Wonderful. Again, thank you, Ben, for sharing your insights on the incredible work that you're doing through the Color of Sound Foundation. And I'm so excited and can't wait to see the documentary titled The Chronically Untouched Project. As soon as it's out, let me know, because I want to check this thing out. I'm sure it's going to be very therapeutic for myself, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with others. So thank you again for taking time out your busy schedule, Mr. Ben Wilson, the CEO of the Color of Sound Foundation, and also one of the major supporters and contributors to launching the Chronically Untouched Project. It's a pleasure to have you on Straight Outta Health IT, and I wish you and your foundation continued success. And we're going to have you back on after the project has been released to talk about how things are proceeding thus far. With that, this is the end of this episode of Straight Outta Health IT. And I want to, again, as always, thank the listeners for taking time out of their very busy schedules to check us out and listen in on the things that we're talking about within our sphere of influence. If you liked what you heard today, you felt it impactful to yourself, please share this episode with your friends, your family, your enemies, anyone that you think can grow from the concepts and conversations that were shared today. And until then, thank you for your support. Take care, and God bless.
Thank you so much for listening to Straight Outta Health IT. We hope you enjoyed today's guest. For more unfiltered dialogue of healthcare leaders and influencers, be sure to tune in next week. For the show notes, transcripts, and resources, please visit Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite streaming platform. We invite you to give us feedback by reaching out to Christopher Cunny on LinkedIn, just searching for Straight Outta Health IT, and you'll find us. We are constantly having live discussions about diverse topics in the industry.